Hey guys, it's Ellie here, and in this video, I'm covering pretty much everything you need to know when it comes to planning a backyard wedding. Now, before I dive into all of the details, I do want to clear a very common misconception, and that is this notion that by planning a backyard wedding, you are going to save yourself a ton of time, stress, and money. This simply is not true. It really just depends on your guest count. That's going to be really the deciding factor in how much money, time, and stress you're going to face. First things first, if you plan on having a smaller guest count, which right now we're dealing with COVID, so most people are, in that case, I highly recommend going with a backyard wedding because in that case, it's true. It does tend to be way less stressful to plan and much less expensive. Things start to change though once that guest count starts to go up. Once you start planning a wedding for 100+ people as a backyard wedding, I would say it becomes even way more stressful to plan a backyard wedding than having one at a venue. The reason being is that venues just include everything. They often take care of so many details that you don't even think about. Whereas in a backyard wedding, there's so many logistics and things that we have to think about. Of course, I'm gonna cover everything in more detail. I'd rather be super honest and upfront. So I just wanna clear that misconception. So let's dive into tip number one. And this is to just really scope out the environment that you're planning on having the wedding at. Ideally, you'll want 3 separate spaces for different parts of your wedding day. So one space for the ceremony, one space for the reception, and another space for the dancing area. Ideally, the dancing area should be on a flat space, so not on grass. And oftentimes the ceremony and reception site can work as the same space, but just keep in mind that there are going to have to be people who switch it up in time. So while your guests are enjoying their cocktails during the cocktail hour, people would have to go in and convert the ceremony site over to the reception. So just be sure to examine the property and make sure that it is big enough to accommodate all your guests and those different sections in a wedding day. Okay, so tip number 2 also has to do with examining the property, and that's just making sure that the floor is even. This is something that we usually don't think about because you usually can't see it if you're just walking around, someone's yard. But once you bring in chairs and tables, uneven ground is really noticeable because the tables will just be uneven or they will begin to wobble, and that'll just affect the experience of your guests. So there may need to be a little bit of yard work in advance to just make sure that everything is even. And also, this is just to prevent any sort of hazard, because once you start mixing alcohol and stilettos, you don't want to have any potholes around. Okay, so tip number 3 is to design a designated dance area. I really feel that any type of flat ground surface will work for this. If the backyard only has grass, in that case, I would rent some type of dancing floor situation. It doesn't need to be a huge space, just a small section where people can dance comfortably and be safe. All right, so the next tip has to do with food. So I would talk to a couple of different caterers and see how they operate. From what I've seen, there are a few different options. One of the options is that they come with the food already pretty much done, and they just have a system where they keep it warm on site and serve it there. Or I've seen other caterers where they actually build a kitchen on site. So they bring all of that equipment and make the food there. I do believe that's a much more expensive option. And then of course there are food trucks, which of course come with all of the equipment to prepare the food in the truck. But just keep that in mind because most homes, most houses don't have a large enough kitchen to accommodate making food for 150+ people. So in most instances, there's going to be some sort of catering situation. I would just reach out to a few caterers and see really what is the best option for you both. All right, so next let's talk about power, electricity. You're going to need a lot of it to power all of the vendors on their wedding day. Things like the caterer, the DJ, any type of lighting situation you have going on. So So I would highly suggest having an electrician go and examine the property and just make sure that everything is on point and ready to go. That way, you know, come the wedding day, you feel secure, because if there's any sort of, you know, fuse issue or something goes out, the last thing you need is having a lack of power for all of those vendors. And another thing is, if you're getting married somewhere where having access to electricity is more of an issue, like the sea or in the middle of a meadow, some type of really amazing environment that's out in nature, in those cases, then you are definitely going to need a generator. Generator is going to provide all of this power for all of your vendors. Now, just keep in mind that generators are typically extremely loud, so you definitely want to place this in an area that's away from your guests. Okay, so number 6 has to do with providing restrooms for your guest. I would say the general rule of thumb is 1 restroom for every 30 people. This will help to prevent any lines from forming. Now, most people do not want all their guests entering their home to use the restroom. So in that case, I would highly recommend renting a bathroom unit. There are some really nice ones that can be rented for around $1,000 that include 2 restrooms, you know, a sink, a mirror. So I would highly suggest doing that, because I feel like it just prevents a lot of stress on the wedding day. And the next thing is parking. Now, this is really something that needs to be figured out in advance. So, you know, if you have all of your guests, just imagine it's going to be probably 1 car for every 2 guests. That's a lot of cars. So what I would do personally to avoid any issues is I would go around to all of your neighbors and maybe give them a bottle of wine, maybe some baked goods. Just basically form, you know, a good connection with them and have an honest discussion about how you are having your wedding day at this property on, you know, X date, and just fill them in. If they are filled in, I feel like they will be way more understanding. If they have any suggestions, be open to them. Just basically form a good line of communication with them, because the last thing you need are any neighbors calling the cops on your wedding day. That is not going to be fun for anyone. The other thing is, I would highly recommend really encouraging your guests to share rides, to perhaps go in the same car or maybe take an Uber. That will really help out with the parking situation. I would say the last thing you can do is to do some sort of shuttle service. So to find an empty lot somewhere and have your guests go and park there, and then they would be shuttled using that service to your property. Now, this does take a little bit more work. It's just more logistics involved. If you're going to do the whole shuttle servicing, I would highly recommend working with a wedding planner for that, because again, they take care of all these extra little logistics, but you know, it's definitely an option. Okay, so the next tip has to do with noise. So most neighborhoods have a amplified noise cutoff time. It varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. Again, I would go around to your neighbors and, you know, do what you did with the whole parking situation. Just when you're talking to them about your day, just let them know that, hey, there are going to be more people parking around the area on this date, and there's going to be music perhaps playing until this time. I feel like as long as you let them know in advance, it will go smoothly. And the other thing is, maybe give them the number of someone on your wedding day, but do not give them your phone number, okay? Because you do not want to be receiving any type of stress-related phone calls on your wedding day. Give them the number of perhaps a close family member or friend, or if you have a wedding planner, I would give them the number of the wedding planner. That way, should, you know, any type of situations arise where the noise is really bothering them come the wedding day, they can call the wedding planner to turn the noise down rather than just directly resorting to calling the cops. Okay, so that leads me to my next tip, which is to hire a wedding planner. This, I would say, is especially needed if you are planning on having a larger scale backyard wedding. A wedding planner is going to save you so much time and energy. They are going to deal with all the logistics that we've discussed so far. And honestly, guys, in my mind, you know, you can either spend the money to hire a wedding planner or you can spend the time. Time you can never get back. money you can always make more of. So in my opinion, it's completely worth it to just save myself that energy and any potential stress. Okay, so the next tip is to get liability insurance. This is just always good to have should something happen. You can get liability insurance on eventhelper.com. I will link down to it below. I think it's somewhere around $100 and it's just worth it to be on the safe side. And then the next thing has to do with rentals. The tables, the chairs, the plates, the utensils, any type of heating lamps, lighting, all of those things that people often rent out to create an event. A lot of that can be secured from, I believe it's called MTB Rentals. I know a lot of wedding planners and people who have planned their own events use them. They're a really great company, and what's great about them is that they pretty much have everything on one website. Next thing to consider are having servers or a staff of people who are going to help set everything up. As far as servers go, hiring them is really going to depend on how you want the food served. If you're doing family style or buffet, you most likely don't need servers. But if you want all those dishes coming out separately, if you want, someone pouring the wine to your guest, servers are definitely needed. They of course will also help to clear the dishes and just take care of a lot of those little logistics. Now, as far as a crew for setting everything up, I think this is a really great way to just help alleviate stress. They will help set everything up for you from the tables to the chairs to the linens. Just make sure that everything looks great. That way you and your family members don't have to worry about it on the wedding day. And also keep in mind that if you are having the ceremony site and the reception site in the same space, you will need a crew of people to transform that space while your guests are enjoying their cocktail hour. All right, so the next thing to think about is lighting. I really think that lighting makes such a difference to a space. If you can add some string lights around the area, I just think it makes it that much more romantic. And the next thing is a bartender. I think this is optional. If you want to just set up a cute bar area section with different options for your guests, or maybe set up a red and white bottle of wine on each table, that would be really great. But if you want to invest in a bartender, that's also a really nice option because you can have them make specialty drinks, and I don't know, I think that could be a really fun choice to have. Now, the other thing, the final thing that I really want to talk about are flowers. Personally, just being a wedding photographer and seeing spaces being transformed, I think flowers are really what make the biggest difference when it comes to elevating any type of space. It really can just set the mood for the event. If you are having the ceremony in one section of the yard, but you really want to create a defined space that is very clearly the ceremony area, you can set up a really beautiful arch filled with flowers. You can also use flowers to decorate the tables for the centerpieces. Now with the flowers, of course, you can make your own arrangements. You can go to your local floral shops and get really creative. Or if you want to just save time and you want to hire a florist, you can do that as well. I will say, from trying to make some centerpieces myself over the years, it's a lot more work than it looks. It really is. So I think it's really worth it to hire a professional florist to really just create some beautiful designs that are going to make the space just look amazing. All right guys, so those are my tips for planning a backyard wedding. I feel like it was a lot. I hope it wasn't overwhelming, but there really is a lot to think about when it comes to planning a backyard wedding, a lot of logistics. Like I said, if you're going for a smaller guest count, I think it's going to be way less stressful and it's an amazing choice. It's just when you start getting into those higher numbers as far as guest count goes that there's just a lot to think about in terms of logistics. But the great thing about having a backyard wedding is you really get to customize everything how you want it. A lot of times with working with different venues, they already have their set vendors that you have to work with. But when you have a backyard wedding, you can choose every single person that you work with, really customizing everything and making it your own. And in that way, it's a really, really amazing option. So hopefully this helps out, guys. If you found this video useful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.